Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to another episode on all things coaching in higher education. I'm your host, Tim Jansa, a certified leadership and organizational development coach and higher ed professional of over 20 years. I'm joined today by a special guest, Laurie Koehler, principal at Koehler Consulting, to discuss enrollment management and student services, arguably one of the most central and important offices on campus, and how coaching can assess and address the significant challenges these units face today. So, let's get going. Welcome to the program, Laurie.
Thanks so much for having me, Tim. It's great to be here with you.
You know, I was really struck by how enrollment management and student support services are such central and essential services on campus. You think they'd be properly resourced or real focus area for employee development and well-being. But based on what you and I have just discussed over the months and what you shared with me in those past conversations, there appear to be some huge issues, especially around staff retention. Maybe to get started, can you give our viewers a little bit of an overview of some of the unique challenges around enrollment management and student service teams and what they're facing right now, and what's driving the loss of talent, and how is it impacting student success and institutional goals?
Sure, Tim. This is such a timely conversation. You know, I spent 25 years in enrollment management for a variety of institutions, small, large, public, private, liberal arts colleges, and research universities. And the world of enrollment management and student services is experiencing more disruption than I've ever seen in my career, as I think probably anyone listening knows, especially over the last year where we've seen the significant changes in federal policy, in executive orders impacting higher education directly and indirectly, shifts in financial aid funding, all of these changes, and leaders are trying to navigate an unpredictable environment while also delivering on really aggressive enrollment and retention goals. And the personal toll of that is real. You know, I remember being on a campus, and this happened on multiple campuses before this kind of intense time that we're in, and being asked, are we going to make the class? I want to know if I'm going to get a raise this year. Or having a staff member tell me they were asked, like a more junior staff member, by someone on campus, do I need to be worried about getting laid off? Are you guys doing your jobs? And, you know, we know that that's a little crazy, that enrollment hinges on numerous institutional and external factors beyond the control of an enrollment management office. But, you know, I think that's where coaching can be such a powerful tool, not just for individual leaders, but for building healthier, more resilient teams and organizations.
You know, what you're mentioning is something, of course, we're observing across all kinds of units and areas and institutions. But I find it so fascinating how enrollment management is really so much impacted by policy and politics, how they come together. You talked about, you know, financial aid, for example. But at the same time, there are all these what you call aggressive goals of maintaining enrollment from the institution. So I could only imagine the intensity of the pressures that everybody in those offices is feeling, and the effect this is going to have on morale, and if not resolved, of course, also on retention. So how can coaching be used to strengthen that retention and increase morale among those enrollment management and student services professionals?
Yeah, it's a great question. The retention issues are real. It's you know, the Whitkeefer professional search firm issued a report within the past 6 months, I think, Shaping the Future of Enrollment Management Leadership, which found that many enrollment management leaders themselves are actively seeking coaching and development opportunities to help them stay effective and engaged, and that they wanted coaching, but a much smaller percentage said they had access to it. It aligns with what we're hearing in HR circles in higher ed as well, that staff retention has risen to the top of institutional priorities, and that this area specifically impacted financial aid, admissions, and student services. I think they've kind of grouped a lot of different roles into student services. Those HR leaders are emphasizing that professional growth opportunities are one of the most effective strategies to keep talent. Um, I think coaching sends a powerful message to leaders and their teams that they're worth investing in. It's not just about fixing a problem. I think for too long in our industry, the only time we ever talked about coaching was as remediation or counseling someone out of a role. And I think the mindset has fortunately shifted, that it's about helping people grow, feel valued, feel supported, and see a future for themselves at that institution. So, whether it's individual or group based coaching, I think it really also helps people feel less isolated and gives them the tools and the encouragement to navigate this really volatile environment we're operating in.
I love how you're bringing up the purpose and the strength of coaching because it is really about the human connection. And when you are in an environment where, in academia, very much because of the silos, kind of
Yes.
breeds a sense of being isolated in many ways, which I have also seen in many administrative offices as well.
Mhm, mhm,
It's really amazing how isolated, how lonely some people feel in the work that they do, especially if it's not a real team environment, but rather it's a group where everybody kind of is responsible for their little area, but there's little interdependency.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so people just doing their work and they don't really know what they're doing it for and how this interacts with others. So I'm really glad that you bring up coaching as a tool to forge that human connection, to feel that what you have to contribute is valued, especially because coaching is such an investment, as you
Mhm,
named
mhm.
it, rather than a fix. So I'm wondering, Lori, when you look at new directors and managers in the enrollment management space, what role does individual coaching play for those people who are stepping into these positions?
You know, that's such a great question. And more, we're seeing search firms in the higher ed space partnering with coaching firms or individual coaches to offer that as a part of their package. They help you identify and recruit and secure a great new leader in enrollment and provide 6 to 12 months of coaching for them as they move through. I think it's just so important, particularly in enrollment management, where we have many newer leaders stepping into senior roles and feeling that weight of the fiscal health of their institutions on their shoulders at many institutions. And that's a lot to carry, especially when the learning curve is steep and there is no window. Expectations are for immediate results. You know, when I stepped into the role of VP of Marketing and Enrollment Strategy at Ithaca College, I knew that working directly with trustees on a regular basis, I had, of course, done presentations with committees of trustees and full boards, but this was a different kind of expectation in terms of my interactions with them. I knew that was an area of growth for me. And so I enlisted the help of an excellent coach. She was a former provost who helped me develop the tools I needed to be more effective and confident in that aspect of my work. That was my first real introduction to coaching and made me it sold me on the idea of it. But it's that kind of targeted, personalized development that can make a huge difference for new leaders who really in enrollment don't have the luxury of figuring it out over a couple of years.
It's always important to remember even coaches need coaches. And I think the best coaches are those who have actually experienced working with a coach and feeling the power of what coaching can do to help you develop and grow on your own terms. Because again, coaching is not about telling people what to do, but it's about really bringing out the best in us and creating a solutions inside. So you mentioned targeted development. And with targeted development, of course, we can't coach every single person. We kind of have to decide and select who we want to target and who we want to develop more, which of course brings up the question of who are the high potential people that we want to target. How do you identify these high potential staff members, and how do you develop them so that they can be the future ready leaders that we need in the enrollment space?
That's a good question. I'm doing actually a lot of work around emerging enrollment leaders. I'm a part of a planning group for a conference called the Academy for Emerging Enrollment Leaders. We kicked it off last year, and we'll do our second year of it, sponsored by the University of Miami School of Education this January, and also doing a pre-conference seminar with my colleagues Liz Sharon and Jen Desjardins at NACAC for folks who think they want to be VPs someday and are in some kind of leadership role. So in some ways, there are folks with titles, and so you can identify, well, that makes sense. And there's also a whole group of folks who might be at that mid-level management role who have incredible potential and maybe had never thought of themselves as moving into a more senior level role. Often those folks, may be women, they may be first generation, they may be folks with some kind of imposter syndrome going into the workplace who just have never thought about that or never had someone tell them. I would say I look for people who bring a level of curiosity to their work and adaptability, an ability to see beyond one's immediate responsibilities. Those are qualities that coaching can help surface and strengthen. And it's also where intentional conversations about career paths and stretch opportunities come in. So I think the coaching piece for those folks helps them build that self-awareness along with the strategic perspective. We do a lot of work around building executive presence and confidence, and also operational versus strategic thinking.
Thank you for the great reminder, Laurie, that leadership and leadership traits are not just found and invested and embodied by people with titles and positions. It's such a shame because we lose out on so much leadership potential in people who are generally not recognized as leaders or as potential leaders. And again, there is such a thing as informal leadership. Even
That's right.
people in frontline offices, people who have a lowly title or really low on the org chart can have a tremendous, or can exercise tremendous leadership, and it can have a tremendous impact on students, on the people around them, and really bring about some change. So I think it's wonderful that you're working in the space of identifying these people and fostering this kind of leadership that goes beyond just helping those who are already in formal leadership positions to be more of a leader, however you want to frame that. So how can you also use group coaching to help address some of those leadership and collaboration challenges that enrollment managers and student support services face?
When I was a VP, Tim, I often felt just so incredibly lonely in my work
Mm.
because no one else at the institution had, and they shouldn't have, right, had the level, unless we had a president who had been a chief enrollment officer, had the depth of knowledge that I had around enrollment management. And you're operating in a sphere where you have people reporting to you, and they may be incredible and talented. And there are times when it's not appropriate to share information or bad ideas because of boundaries. So my passion project when I jumped into this work of doing coaching and consulting, I didn't know what it was exactly. I knew what I wanted it to be. And eventually, with some help from some good friends, it emerged into an executive leadership circle, which I'm just wrapping up for, this one was for chief enrollment officers. So there were 7 powerful leaders who we would do individual coaching sessions at the front and the back of these 9 months, and then meet for 2 hours, 1 2-hour session roughly each month. So it was essentially group coaching, and the feedback from the group members has been incredibly positive. I think they've described it as a safe, confidential space to be vulnerable, to learn new things about themselves, to develop professional skills, because each of these coaching meetings had, a focus on a particular area of growth. and to give and receive both peer coaching and coaching from me. And so they built incredibly strong connections, used each other's resources, and pushed each other to grow as leaders. So I'm building out 3 more cohorts, given with the encouragement of my current group members. One for chief enrollment officers, one for lead financial aid folks who have been through the ringer, and one for admission leaders. So people who might have a title of a dean or director of admission. And so the group members, as I recruit, it's really important for me to look for folks who bring a level of self-awareness, which I think is the most important role of being a good leader. People who are great listeners and also committed to their own growth and to supporting each other. So it's really amazing what can happen when you create space for leaders to step out of their day-to-day, to reflect with intentionality and engage in really honest conversations about their challenges and their opportunities.
I love this idea of creating a safe, confidential space. That, of course, is something we do as coaches in one-on-ones, but of course, you can also do this in groups. As you know, psychological safety, especially in high pressure environments, and then in this kind of siloed, very competitive world that higher ed sometimes is not always a given. So it must be a real breather for some of your participants to be able to come into these environments and just say, okay, I can just be my authentic self here. I can speak openly, be who I am, and speak my mind. And I can imagine what a huge impact that is going to have. You also addressed peer coaching. So really what you're addressing here is leadership as coaching, really. So you're training your leaders to also be coaches. And this leaders as coaches, we've seen all these workshops and they all sound kind of promising, and I've experienced some at my former institution, but they never seem to really go anywhere because they're like one-offs. So what can you do to kind of help your leaders to establish maybe some more sustainable practices in which they can support their teams and ultimately also reduce turnover by becoming more of a coach rather than, a manager?
Yeah. I think my good friend and fellow coach, more senior coach than me, someone I've learned so much from, is a guy named John Chokotowski with North Star Coaching. And he and I have spent a year batting this whole idea around, like, how do we bring this mindset to teams and to organizations. We've been focusing on higher ed. So we developed a Leaders Coach workshop for institutions like the University of Vermont, where we really focus on equipping managers with the skills to be more effective, more supportive, more empowering of their team members. How many times do we hear about the bottleneck that happens, or the mindset of, it's going to take me more time to teach someone else to do this, and I don't have the time, so I'm just going to do it myself. What a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
And so, as a coach, this, Tim, it's about shifting from being purely directive to being curious, to asking open-ended questions, to helping team members think through solutions themselves. And, what we're doing with Vermont so far suggests that the leaders are using what they've learned in their daily interactions with staff, which is really the point. So building their own capacity by building their team members' capacities.
There are 2 things that you bring up that really, really resonate with me. The first one is the idea of a mindset shift. I talk and write a lot about mindset shifts because, number one, I think a lot of people who have gone through the very hierarchical, top-down command and control structures of higher ed, they still have a very outdated sense of what leadership actually is and what a leader's mindset should be. So I think addressing that and shifting more to what I would like to call more like a servant leadership approach, where the role of the leader is to really support their teams rather than direct them. And you mentioned that, which again aligns perfectly with the idea of coaching, because coaching is non-directive. But then also this idea of intentionality and being very deliberate about what kind of skills you bring out in these teams that you're working with. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about this, like intentional team building, especially in the enrollment space, and how perhaps that can kind of break down some silos and eventually maybe create a little more of a student-centered culture?
I was actually just talking with a coaching client who is a VP about this, about the value of devoting time to not only talking about what the work is, but how we do the work and how we do the work together. I do think often you talked about one and done workshops, Tim, and I think we don't create the space because the pressures are so intense, because the time is so scarce. Except maybe we do a summer retreat, and that's the end of it. I was exposed to what I didn't know to call team coaching when I was at George Washington University. And I led a large unit there. It encompassed student affairs, student success, and enrollment management. And we were working with a group of consultants from Cambridge Hill Partners. And every month they were helping us with organizational development. And they were doing team coaching with me and my leadership team. And so every month we devoted one extended time of our leadership meetings focused on how we work together. We focused on things like radical candor and how do we have those hard conversations with each other? How can we have them in a group setting, not just individually? How do we structure our meetings? How do we define collaboration? It's amazing when you actually ask people to define what collaboration means. People will say, I'm collaborating. I invited those people to the meeting. And then the meeting structure is one that is not the least bit collaborative. And so those kinds of intentional conversations allowed everyone on the team to begin to see the connections across their work. And also, Heifetz and Linsky talk about the dance floor and the balcony and how leaders need to be able to make that shift. And sometimes you have to be able to do both. But to see this group evolve in this way, where they were able to see beyond and understand how what they might be working on was bigger than their silo, bigger than their unit, and was really important for them to engage with their colleagues across the larger division was really remarkable to see. And what makes me so proud is I left GW shortly after we were really in a groove, and those habits that we built together outlasted me, which was the goal, right? This was not driven by a person. This was a process. And those habits also outlasted the dissolution of the team in its previous form and kind of reconstruction. Those relationships and that ability to navigate that wouldn't have happened without taking that intentional focus on how do we operate together and have real conversations with each other.
I love that. That's really a success story you just shared with us. This thing about adaptive leadership, leadership is contextual. I always say that, just because a certain type of leadership might be generally preferable, it really depends on the environment. So the context shifts. And so, of course, leaders have to adapt to whatever the circumstances are. Sometimes it's a little more directive. Sometimes it's a little more, what I would call servant leadership and serving the people around them. You just have to be flexible and agile in the way you lead. I also love this idea of collectively defining outcomes, because what happens is the team collectively owns the outcome. It's not like one person is then responsible if things go well or don't go well, or
That's right.
can get all the praise if things do go well, but it's spread across the team, or all the stakeholders, whoever was part of this process. And this is such a powerful, as a motivational thing. And I could see how that strategy and that technique with the support of a coach can really help um, bring people in and retain people because they get a sense of ownership of the positive outcome. So I think this is a super powerful strategy. And finally, also this moving from the dance floor to the balcony. I've been an educator all my life, and where I first encountered this idea of teaching from the back of the room.
Mm.
And this is something I've done pretty much all my life. Was just about asking questions and just giving people space to explore what it is you're trying to teach them and not being too directive about it. You just set the stage and then just kind of let them go, let them learn and develop and grow on their own turf at their own speed. And I think with leadership, it's exactly the same thing, right? I know there are pressures we're dealing with here. There are outcomes, there are KPIs, but whatever space you can make as a leader and as a coach, help your leader devise a strategy to create the space. I think that is a super powerful technique as well. So I'm wondering, for those of our listeners who might have an opportunity, maybe coach in the enrollment space, or might have been approached by somebody in this world, what advice would you give to those coaches, or even on a broader scale? What advice could you give also to vice presidents, to deans, or directors who want to introduce coaching in their enrollment and student services teams?
My first advice, as much as I want to be needed and loved, is coaching doesn't have to start with bringing in external help. Leaders can begin by adopting a coaching mindset, as we discussed before, with their own teams. There's some great work you can do on your own. Go by Michael Bungay Sneer's The Advice Trap and The Coaching Mindset and read them and recognize yourself in them. They'll help you rethink how you engage with your team and the individuals on your team. Leading whenever possible with open-ended questions, resisting the urge to jump in immediately and offer advice or fix something. That's kind of funny. You asked me for advice on this question, and I'm telling people don't.
Ironic, isn't it?
I think modeling that approach can change the tone and the culture of your team's interactions. Mm-hmm. Our work with the University of Vermont, we're really fortunate to be working with a vice president for enrollment, Jay Jacobs, who is deeply committed to developing his team, both individually and as a unit. He does a staff assessment every year to understand where people are and how they're feeling about their work and how they're feeling about the unit. And, that's another way that we as leaders or as people with roles that put us in those positions is to get a sense of the temperature of what's happening and have skip level meetings and really dig into understanding what is happening within your culture, within your team. And then just be open and reach out to people like you, to people like me, to understand a little bit more about what some options are out there.
Words to live, lead, and coach by, Laurie. Thank you so very much for joining me today. This was a really, really fascinating conversation. I learned so much because this is a world I didn't really know too much about. So I'm really, really glad you made the time and joined us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Tim. I love talking with you.
And to all of you watching, thank you so much for making time for us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please click the like button. And as always, subscribe to this channel. Your support really means the world to us. You can find more information on this episode, our guest, and today's topic at our companion website, higheredcoaching.us and leadershipimagined.com/podcast. See you next time, and keep making a difference, one client and one conversation at a time. Thanks so much.